Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kimball, somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent business owners. We have an amazing episode today about building confidence and how to connect authentically as an introverted business owner. I know I am highly sensitive, neurodivergent, and very introverted. So there's a lot of intersection, I think, on a lot of those things and a lot for us to explore here that I think will be useful for so many people. So I am joined by Amber. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself before we dive in.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Kim, for having me. So, my name is Amber Hansel. I'm an introvert confidence coach. And really, I am a mom of two boys and have, in the last few years, pivoted to coaching after doing lead generation engagement for other people for so many years. And it was really at that point of I started embracing who I am. I'm an introvert and I was having so much going on. And so it was just about realizing that I'm not the only one that feels like this and that I have tools to share with others.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you actually kind of dove straight away into one of my first questions, which was how you became an introvert confidence coach. Is there anything else that you want to share about that journey, or did that feel complete for you?
Yeah, so I really started it because after a few years of doing lead gen engagement for others and in this space, I was going, I don't want to do that anymore, but I feel so passionate with connecting with people in this online space that there are ways to do it without feeling like I have to be someone else, that I have to be this most outgoing person to be who I who I was supposed to be in this space. And so it came into really leaning into myself and I started doing meditations and I've always journaled, but I leaned more into it and spent more time with myself after, my kid turned 5. It seems like once your youngest turns 5, the fog lifts and you're like, who am I as a person? And I really came into, oh, okay, I can breathe and take time for myself because my kids are gonna be okay now. And I think that's where this whole thing started from.
Well, you are sort of talking to me from the other side. I have always had like a mile marker in my mind of like, I think I'm gonna have a little bit more spaciousness for myself when my son turns 5. Right now, he like just turned 2 in March. So you're confirming what I have like felt in my body. They're like, oh, I think it's gonna happen when my kid slash kids, if I have another, turns 5. So that's good to hear. But also just want to speak to what you shared of coming to this realization of I don't want to have to navigate the business world, the online world, trying to feel like I need to be someone that I'm not. And that messaging is something that is the heart of the work that I do is, for my people, highly sensitive, neurodivergent. Like I said, I'm also introverted. There's such strong messaging out there around, you have to be everywhere all the time and speak loudly and do more. And really, a lot of these things go against our nature and the way that we are organically wired as people who are highly sensitive, introverted, neurodivergent. And so just having someone else to have their voice in this space of like, hey, you can actually honor how you're created, your unique wiring, and really helping people build the skill set of being themselves in their business is so, so important. So thank you for sharing your journey with that. Yeah. Well, you talk about confidence as a skill, which
Mhm.
this is something I talk a lot about too, because I think a lot of times people make the mistake, they come to me and think that confidence is a feeling. and that that's very fickle and that it comes and it goes. And sometimes I feel confident, sometimes I don't. And I don't know how to get myself to a place of feeling confident. Again, it's that feeling.
Mhm.
But can you tell us more what you mean about confidence being a skill and how you coach your clients to go about building this skill of confidence, especially if they're introverted?
Yeah. So it's understanding yourself first and honoring you already have that confidence inside of you. It's already there. It's just understanding what brings it out. What are you doing in the space? Because if you're doing something and you don't feel confident, obviously it's not for you. Because when you're doing things and it feels good and it's, energetically there for you, that's when your confidence is. When you're shining and you are rambling on and feeling this like hype, that's confidence. And also understanding how you can go about it in your business and where it is in your business. Is it in your content? Is it in the DMs? Is it, you know, in your programs? Is it in the service that you offer? Where is it exactly that the confidence is?
Mm. So it sounds like for you, confidence is doing what you are naturally wired to do. And then you're going to feel very differently if you're doing the things that you're naturally wired to do versus if you're forcing yourself to do something that honestly isn't a fit for your unique blueprint. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. You put it into much more eloquent words for me.
Yeah, so like I'll give you some examples just so people that are listening can
Mhm.
maybe apply this to their own business in a way of for example, I'm somebody that is a very nuanced thinker, and I tend to want to explore concepts and a lot of depth. And doing that in an Instagram post is really hard. And so I gravitate more towards blog post, for example, or platforms like this, my own podcast, where I can have an hour long in depth conversation with somebody and get really, really curious about a topic. And so my energy, my confidence feels a lot greater in these formats versus, trying to limit myself to an Instagram caption limit and things like that. Would that be kind of an example of what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. So, really understanding, hey, my podcast and blog are where I can express myself in the best format. And then what you can do is just take snippets from that and create numerous Instagram posts. So, it's still you, but yes. These social media can feel constricting to some of us that feel that talking or writing and diving into one topic for more in depth or for a longer period of time is where we need to be. And social media feels fast paced and we can't keep with the same topic. But because we have to remember that Instagram and LinkedIn and all of these social media platforms, we can keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. One blog post is 4, 5 social media posts. And remembering that our long form content can be broken up, that it can be short form as well, giving us our energy back and allowing us to keep talking about the same thing we want to talk about over and over again because we feel so confident about it.
Yeah, yeah. I talk about repurposing content all the time,
Mhm.
especially, as people as a way to honor your capacity as a business owner, right? Of like, you don't need to be creating all of these new pieces of content over and over again. First of all, there's the fact that most people aren't going to see it. And so repurposing it in a different way either is going to reinforce something that they were really jazzed
Mhm.
about in the first place, or it's going to be the first time they see it, right? Um, and because this kind of circles back to me being a nuanced thinker and wanting to like explore these things in real depth in real time and me enjoying that, I would love to add a bit of that nuance, I think, to this conversation about confidence. It's just my own understanding. I echo everything that you have shared. And I also am thinking about some of the challenges that my people come to me with, and that is that a lot of the things, even if it is naturally in your wheelhouse, there's going to be some fear that comes up with it that I don't want people to hear what we're talking about and then be like, well, if I feel the least amount of discomfort, I'm not going to do it. Right. Um, and when I first started my podcast, not that I've been doing this so terribly long, but I've done it long enough now where I feel much more at ease doing it than I did initially, right? And same thing with, publishing blogs or publishing Instagram content or going live on Instagram or being interviewed on a podcast. Like, just because there is some in my world, the somatic is the thing. Just because there's some physical sensations of discomfort that come up with that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not your blueprint of what aligns with you. So I want to bring that nuance into the conversation, and we can support ourselves on a somatic level. And my understanding, what I really love to talk to folks, which we each have our like unique facets of this. I love your facet that you talked about, but I also want to bring in, like, I find that confidence gets built by doing the thing and recognizing, like, I didn't die and it actually went well. And even though I had some physical sensations of discomfort, I was able to support myself. I did not say push through. I was able to support myself, um, and do this. And that builds this confidence by actually completing the task, by actually doing the thing. And so I love the combination of these two things that we're talking about, of like doing the aligned thing and that confidence building as a result of doing the aligned thing.
I absolutely agree. And that's too, I love to understand. You have to understand your body's emotions and how you feel doing certain things. If it's like, okay, it's fear but still feels good, it's nervous, excited energy, then you need to lean more into it, and really going, okay, listening and sitting with yourself and going, I'm not gonna die if I try this. It's gonna be okay if I post this to Instagram. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing dramatic will happen. And sometimes I say, if you're scared to do a post, if it's, a topic that you are like on the fence about, definitely post it because I can guarantee you that someone else is doing the same thing and they need to hear that message.
Yeah. 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 I love this. You and I weaving together our different facets of confidence here.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about that there's actually four different types of introverts, which I was unaware of, which when I started reading that in your content, I was like, whoa, tell me more. So can you explain each type so that those who are listening can identify which type they are and perhaps understand themselves a little bit better?
Yeah, I know. As I started diving more into introverts and finding out that there was different types, it made sense because, we always hear, well, I really enjoy talking to people but I'm still an introvert and all of these things. So I'm like, well, there are types. So the four types are social, anxious, thinking, and restrained. And of course, with all of these things, they may be called different terms across the thing. But first up is social. So some signs that you might be a social introvert is you prefer to spend time with small groups of people. So needing time alone, you still need that time alone to regain your energy, especially after socializing, but you're also selective around who you're socializing with. And you need to have control over that social schedule and interactions. And that goes back to choosing who you're going to socialize with in that small group. And you might prefer to meet new people, but in familiar situations. So at your favorite restaurant or at your favorite coffee shop, because then it's more of, I got this, I can do this. This is my setting. Because imagine this, you're invited to a giant party and a social introvert might skip the party altogether, or they might just pop in briefly because they'd rather spend the time with their best friends catching up instead of going to the big party. The next one is anxious introverts. It's more the emotional side of introversion. So they often feel uneasy in social settings, even small ones. So they're nervous being around other people. They ruminate about social interactions. They worry. They're very highly self-conscious when they are around others, and they have a hard time starting conversations. So this anxiety doesn't just vanish when they're alone either. So they might replay those conversations in their head, worrying about what they're saying. And so it's not just a preference for solitude for anxious introverts, it's a need for them to recover from the emotional strain of the anxiety. So a thinking introvert, they're not necessarily shy or anxious. They're incredibly introspective. And this is where I am definitely a thinking introvert. So I love a deep, thoughtful analysis, highly analytical and logical. They're thinking independently and solving problems and trusting their own judgment. And they pay attention to details and spotting things that others might miss. They often get lost in their own thoughts, and it's the best thing because we're daydreaming, we're reflecting, we're engaging in our own inner world. So we can just sit at a coffee shop and stare out the window and just be. The last one is a restrained introvert, also known as a reserved type. They take their time, whether it's warming up to new people, starting their day. They like to think before they speak or act and deliberate everything that they do. So they're very cautious when making decisions. They prefer a routine that's predictable so they can go about their day. So they avoid those spontaneous events that just pop up. Those people are ducking out really, really fast. And so they enjoy also engaging in inner reflection and pay a lot of attention to detail because they need a lot of time alone, especially after they've engaged in some social interaction. So they're going to, kind of be like a car. They need some time to warm up. They are going to slower pace, cautious or distant at first, but that's just their nature. So those are all the four brief types.
That is so enlightening. And so, okay, I want to ask you this question because, of course, I was tracking like, what am I as you were sharing this? Um, I see myself in all of them except for the last one, the restrained
Mhm.
one. Probably most prominently in the social introvert.
Mhm.
Like everything that you said in the social introvert, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And then I identified with pieces, like I said, of all the other ones except for the restrained. Is that typical where you can sort of see different elements in each and then you maybe have one predominant pattern?
Yeah, and I think it also just follows in with a lot of our personality or the situation that we're in. Certain situations, you're gonna kind of pull out more than one type or a predominant type. You can always try to determine like, do you prefer spending time with small groups of people or, by yourself more? Like, how do you energize? Do you feel anxious in social settings or overthink your interactions? Do you spend a lot of time daydreaming, overanalyzing, or do you approach social situations slowly? So that way you can kind of go, yeah, well, sometimes I do. Okay, what can I do to kind of, help support myself through this? We get invited. There are some things that we get invited to and we're going. We're going to that networking event, but maybe it's okay. I know that there's going to be 50 people there. So where can I be that maybe there's only going to be a small group of people at this table that I can talk to? Or my goal is to meet two new people at this event. Our goal is not when we decide, okay, yeah, I am this type. It's not to let it overtake us. It's same with like a buyer types too, and all of the other types. It's not for it to control you. It's to go, I recognize it, and now this is how I'm going to react to it.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful distinction. And I make that kind of that similar distinction for the labels, any labels that we put on ourselves, right? The label of highly sensitive, the label of introvert, the label of neurodivergent.
Mhm.
Like these labels aren't meant to limit our range of who we are or to shove ourselves in the box and like these characteristics of these people fully explain how I am in the world and how I show up and what things I do. It's just meant to inform, it's meant to give you more knowledge about yourself, to understand yourself more deeply, but not to limit yourself in that way of like, oh, well, I am this type of introvert and therefore I can never do this, right? That's not what we're saying here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more about just building up that self-acceptance and, achieving personal growth with that knowledge and saying, hey, like I can set that boundary of I'm only gonna go here for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's my limit today. That's what I'm gonna go. And it might understand to change from day to day. How are you setting up your calendar even in the online space? How many calls are you taking a day? Or maybe you don't take calls. How many, clients are you taking and what are you doing for them? And understanding, how much energy and extrovert that you have to do in your business because we do run businesses, but that doesn't mean that you have to push and keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. This leads perfectly into my next question, which is about your signature harmony method and pretty much everything that we've been talking about, right? Your need to understand yourself and your business. So, your strengths, your personality type, what type of introvert are you, like we just shared? What energizes you, which allows you to set appropriate boundaries as well as routines for your growth that are specific to who you are. So, of course, we've talked about this a little bit already, but I would love to talk about how you help your people really understand themselves more so that they can get out of this copying and pasting kind of the extroverted form quote unquote formula for success that we've been handed in the online world, especially of like you have to do these things in order to be successful. Yeah, I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. So it's really about embracing the strengths that we have. So are you like an active listener or extra empathy? And then it's like, okay, well, comments are really great, but maybe it's not building that relationship and having those meaningful conversations that we really want. Because as introverts, we don't necessarily like small talk. So understanding, I don't like that. How can I have a bridge to building that? So, oh, I'm really good at listening. Maybe if I get them into the DMs, or maybe they can, we can do a live together or do a collab together because I'm really going to listen to what their needs are and then share my input. And say you get them into the DMs, you're listening and asking questions. And that is a strength that I think introverts don't utilize enough. And knowing that we have power in our voice, we just don't have to be loud about it. We many introverts have podcasts. We have blogs. We show up on certain platforms and more sometimes longer form content because we have a lot of thoughts. We have a lot of thoughts that we want to get out. And so when we decide to choose platforms and embrace, hey, I'm going to do that, and then I can take pieces of that and break it down, like I had spoke about earlier. So really going, where do I want to actually show up and not showing up everywhere? We don't need to be on in Facebook groups and on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Substack and Medium and on podcasts and this and sending out 100 emails. That's overwhelming. So really picking and choosing and going, hey, my strength lies with writing long form content. I'm going to write blogs and I'm going to post them over to Substack. And then I'm going to create an email newsletter. And maybe that newsletter also goes on LinkedIn. There you go. I think we love to overcomplicate it. And so when we break it down and go, hey, my strength is this, I can use this, this, and this to really share my message because I want to help people. And reframing too that mindset of, well, I'm just an introvert and I'm shy and I'm quiet and I don't have the words to say. Well, why did you just write a 2,000-word blog post and tell me you don't have words to say? Is about reframing that mindset of going, I can show up how I want to show up, but I don't have to dance in a corner to make other people notice me.
Ugh, no to the dancing. Nothing wrong with the dancing if that is what you want, but like I've just never, that's not me, not my thing. And I feel like there's constantly these trends of the dancing, the pointing, the all of the things. I'm just like, no, 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 no. Um, Figuring out your strengths, like you said, and being able to recognize, okay, I can do this, 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 and like that can be my entire strategy. I don't need to overcomplicate it. I don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to force myself to do all of these things that ultimately don't feel good to me. There's so much freedom in that. So, yeah. Well, what are some of the ways that you see introverted business owners unintentionally limit themselves, maybe based on stories that they have about what being introverted means? I know you already briefly mentioned that in the last question, and what you do to help them with that.
Yeah, so I'd say a lot of times it's I can't show up in the online space because I don't want to show my face. How do I show up? I don't want to like talk in front of people. If we go back, sometimes they're really, really, they didn't come from anything. We don't always born into the online space like many are now. We're have to reframe our mindset to how can I serve people and get to know people and build trust with them. And I always say Instagram stories is such a great place to start with building up your confidence in speaking because it is 1 minute segments and they disappear after 24 hours and you get to practice before you post it. If you don't like it, get rid of it, but we can't fall under the perfectionism either. Messy is better. People want to see you mess up, really. They want to see you stumble over your words or because it puts more of a human touch with you. They want humans, and we have over the few years, the online space was inundated. And then it's been a clearing out, but there was a lot of trust broken. And so right now, people are rebuilding trust with people and they want real people. They don't want faceless accounts. They want to see a face and a name with a human connection going, hey, I have a dog too. I have kids that are insanely wild and feral. Hey, how can we connect over something that's not just business? And introverts are very good at that. So we need to lean more into human connection because that's where we thrive is in building relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. The posts that are like me and my just humanness always perform the best.
Yeah.
Always, always. So,
Okay.
let's use that to segue into talking about authentic connections for introverts because I know that's something you talk about a lot. So obviously building connections is a tremendous part of having a business. I would say I would even go so far as to say it's maybe like the key component for successful business is building
Right.
connections. But as you've already mentioned, it can be something that introverts tend to avoid, right? For all of the reasons and the four different types that you've already elaborated on and gone into. So how do you help introverted business owners connect in ways that actually feel good to them, which of course is kind of the theme, um, with both with fellow business owners and also with their audience?
I would say just start. Just start talking. And it doesn't have to be about business. We put so much pressure on ourselves, and other people put pressure on us. Well, make sure in the DMs that you're selling, they need to know what you're doing. They need to know. Or in your content, make sure you're selling because if you're not selling, they don't know. Yes, this is all true. But at the same time, social media is not meant for straight selling. It is social media. We are here to be social and connect. It was actually created not to be a business. So we have to remember that that's how it's meant to be. And realizing, oh, hey, like I said, I'm really good at talking to people or texting people and asking questions. The more curious you get, the better. So, the more questions that you ask, the more you can connect with people because that's how you get to know someone is asking questions. I always get, well, the conversation died. Okay, so what did you ask? Well, I didn't ask anything. That's why the conversation died because there was nothing going back and forth. Back and forth means questions. Just like this podcast, there's questions, there's answers, there's conversations around it, and opinions and thoughts. That can all happen in the DMs. It can happen on calls. We just have to remember to go back to the 3, 4-year-old little kid asking why 5 million trillion times a day. But why they're doing it is because they're learning. They're learning about the people around them and the space around them. So when we go, oh yeah, I don't know anything about this stranger. How are you going to learn about them? You can't help them in their business if you don't know what their business is. And that's why cold pitches don't work because why would I work with someone that doesn't know me or how I operate my business? It's about getting to know them as a person because many of us, our business is who we are. It is a big piece of us. So if you don't know who that person is, you don't know their business either.
Hmm. Yeah. I have a couple of questions coming up for me with this.
Mhm.
So one of them is that I find for the hardest part for me as an introvert is two things. Number one, I have a hard time knowing what to do to start a conversation. And number two, this kind of goes into my next question for you, which is you've already mentioned and alluded to this fact of like, I'm very unsatisfied by surface level conversations. And so it's like, okay, how do I start a conversation that doesn't like scare people off? Then I'm starting the conversation with like the deepest question ever. And also, like, there's more around that of like the other thing that was coming up for me is I think a lot of us in the online space have become so jaded, even by simple questions. I love the idea of asking questions, but I think a lot of us are even guarded to even innocent questions, even if we don't have an agenda that it's going somewhere. Like, I know as a business owner, I will get countless questions in my DMs, and I know and I sense and I sniff out immediately that they're trying to do like the engagement for the purpose of a sale, right? Which is totally different than what I know you're talking about here, which is that authentic engagement, the authentic connection that you're seeking for people. So I know that was a lot, so I'm going to sort of break it down. Like, how can we actually start the conversation if we're someone that has a hard time initiating conversations? How can we make it something that feels satisfying if we do want deeper connections? And how can we make it in a way that it is that authentic connection that doesn't feel on the other end that people are like, well, I'm trying to engage in an authentic way, but people have their guards up against that in today's
Yeah.
day and age, right?
Yeah. So to start with, how to start. So stories are great. You can reply to stories, and many times it's going to go deeper than, hey, how are you? Right? You see something in their stories, it piques your interest. Like maybe they're posting about their gardening. Ooh, what is in your garden? What are you doing this year? What do you like to plant? That is going deeper. And then also you can send their own post to them with your thoughts. So instead of a comment, send it as a message. And you can then type more information about what you thought about their post instead of leaving a comment. This can start the conversation. And surface level, we have to remember too, don't be guarded in your answers when they ask you something. You can kind of reverse it. So if they say, how was your weekend? You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to start this conversation because, like it's so boring. It was fine. What do you want from me? You can just say, oh, it was really rainy, but I love rainy days because I'm reading this book right now and I get to curl up with it and learn about this. What book are you reading lately? So we just took a how is your weekend to a I love reading books. What are you reading? So you're taking it deeper. And then once they say, oh, I'm reading this. Oh, I haven't heard of that. What is it about? Or what kind of topics do you like to read about? What do you get to know? So then you're diving into their personality and them as a person. Once you're done talking about books, then it can go into business. Do you do any business books? Maybe they've already talked about that. Oh, what are some recommendations? Do you listen to podcasts? Oh, that's cool. I have a podcast too. I recently talked about this topic. So you're moving them through a phase. It's talking about business. You're serving value because you're giving ideas, opinions. Oh, hey, I have a podcast over here. I like to read these books. You're proving your authority within the conversation. You're answering them in a deeper way than it was good. I hung out. So then we're bridging that into, and so it doesn't feel like you are being inauthentic or super salesy when you say, yeah, I'm reading this book. I might next week do a podcast episode on it on my podcast. This. Do you listen to podcasts? That is general conversation. And then they might listen to your podcast. They might sign up for your email list. They might look at your content and go, oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I do actually need what she's talking about. And she really did. So within that conversation, they might bring up something. You say, hey, you know what? I would love to chat with you more about this. I have a 30-minute coaching call available. You're not pressing it. It's just within conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I especially loved and resonate with those ideas of like how to start the conversation. That gives me a great place to start. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing those.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the benefits of being an introverted leader. I think oftentimes, I don't know, a lot of the languaging around it is, almost the way that it's a hindrance or that it holds you back. And I know that both you and I feel much differently, that there's a lot of actual benefits to being an introverted leader. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what some of those are.
It's that we spot things a mile away. We can see that pitch coming and we know how to either just back away or lean into it. And we understand ourselves in order to give space for ourselves and then for our clients and our audience. Because once we are going, hey, you know what? This is my boundaries. You don't get to cross them. These are superpowers. I have so many superpowers, and so do you, and so do many of the listeners out there. We are very empathetic. We are really good listeners. And when we talk, it's many times very thoughtful. And we don't take our words for granted because we've thought about them probably too much. But then they come out and people are like, yeah, okay. And that builds trust with other people that we can do just because we decide to show up in a different way. And that also makes us stand out in this space of where everyone seems to be doing the latest trend. And we're over here posting a static image on Instagram with the full 2000 limit caption as possible. And people are resonating with it. So it's important to note that we can use those powers, use our words, our written format, our verbal, our tone, our listening to impact those around us.
I love that so much. Well, Amber, I would love to hear where people can connect with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm also more active lately on LinkedIn. I have been loving the chill vibe over there. It feels calmer, it feels more white space. So I'm there as well as my website and everything is Amber Hansel. So you can find my Instagram is the Amber Hansel, but you can find me and I am there sharing and loving and in my DMs most frequently.
Mm, love that. Well, I'm going to transition us into a few rapid fire questions, lighthearted. You don't have to think too long about it, just so that others can get to know you a little bit better, if that feels okay.
Yeah.
The first question is just, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it may need another moment to wrap up from our podcast today?
Um, I have my own podcast as well called Introverts Unmuted, where I do have an episode, actually a couple episode on the types of introverts and really how to build that authentic connection with your audience, depending on where you are. And so you can find those at Introverts Unmuted where I just talk about being an introvert in this online space and how to show up with all those superpowers.
Mm, beautiful. What do you wish people knew about your experience as an introverted person in the world?
That it takes a while to fully embrace it, and it's a journey. You can't just say, yep, that's, I'm done. There is still going to be roadblocks each step every day. You don't know what's going to happen, but understanding how to regulate yourself as an introvert is so powerful and understanding your energy and going, well, today I have the energy for one person. That's it. Maybe that's your husband and that's all you have. Well, that's all you get. You don't have to show up in the online space every single day, 24/7. You don't need to. That's a lie. You can show up when you want to. If that's 2 times a week, do it. Because there are so many other platforms out there for you to be in.
Yeah, love that. What's the last thing that truly inspired you?
Um, I would say really like my family. I have two boys. They're really the reason I started this business 7 years ago because my baby is going to be 7 this year. So I started my business with a baby, like a newborn and a toddler, and they have taught me so much through the years. I've been through all the different phases. Now they're going to be 10 and 7. So they're in school, and it feels so different now than back then. I've even homeschooled for a little bit. I've had a nanny for a little bit. We've done daycare. I've done all the things. So I understand all the phases. They're all amazing, but each one is different and each phase is different. And it's like your business is going to evolve and it's going to change and it's going to grow just as you will. So just hang on and embrace it. And those little moments are exactly what you're here for.
Mm, love that. Last question. What consistently brings you deep joy?
Mm. I like for myself, I love good coffee in bed moment. When I had my newborn toddler, it felt like I couldn't get that because it was like they're always needed. I had that before, and then it was like as I got older, I got it back, and I didn't realize how much that changes my day, how much I can then just take that moment and go, yes, I'm good. My kids now know Saturday mornings or whatever, that's mom. I'll deal with dad. And during the week I try to take time just to maybe have that coffee in quiet and go and take those deep breaths and say, I've got this, because mornings can be hectic with kids trying to get them to where they need to be and regulate their emotions. And I've really learned that when I'm in a happy place, everyone else is in a happy place. So that is my joy, is just knowing that I can take care of myself first, which took a very long time for me to understand.
Mm, yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I just really appreciate you giving us permission on this podcast today to step into this quiet, powerful, introverted leadership and to truly embrace the way that we are made in our businesses. It's such a powerful message that I think we can all really utilize and learn so much from. So, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.